Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So in today's video, we're continuing to work with doubly linked lists, but today we're going to be working with the reverse function, or rather coding up the reverse function. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. All we want to do is, if we have a doubly linked list that goes A, B, C, D, we want to basically make it so that it's reversed, so we get D, C, B, A. And so that is what the reverse function will do. If you guys want, pause the video and come back. Pause the video and try it on your own. If you guys have any trouble, come back and we'll work through it together. But hopefully you guys have done that by now. And I'm gonna start. So the first, we're going to declare two variables. One is going to be called prev, which is going to be equal to none, and cur, which will be equal to self.head. Let me get rid of this. And so we're going to say while cur, we basically, what we want to do is, if we're on our A node, right, we want to keep track of what the next node is, and then we want to say that our a.next points to the prev, and that we then move over to our next node. And so basically, I think a better example is let's look at this B node. I think that would be an easier example. If we're looking at this B node, right now, the next value of the B node is the C, which is the next element of the B node. What we want to say is that we want the next element of our B node to point to the A node, right? So we want to say our cur.next should be equal to the cur.prev. And then what we want to do, we also want to say that our that when we move our cur over, we can't say cur is equal to cur.next, because we already declared that our cur.next should point to our cur.prev over here. And so what we want to say, we want to store our next node in a separate variable within the while loop, so that when we move our cur over, that we can keep moving it over without having to kind of loop back, if you kind of understand that. I think it'll make more sense if we start coding it up. And so without further ado, the first thing we want to say is that if cur dot, let's see, if we're starting off at our A node, right? And so what we want to say that instead of our a.next pointing to the B, we want our a.next to point to none. And so we want to say that our cur.next will be equal to the cur.prev. Before I do that, I'm going to make one variable called cur.next. And so what this is going to do is that we're on this A node right here. This next variable is going to hold the B node here, so that when we move our cur over, we can just say cur is equal to next. And so if we store our B node in our next node here, what we can say is that our cur.next should then point to, instead of pointing to the B, it should point to the none, which in this case is the cur.prev. And then what I'll say also is that if cur.prev cur.prev.next is equal to cur, right? So what we're saying in this case is that if we're working on this middle node, we're saying that we declare that our cur.next should point to our cur.prev. So instead of the B pointing to the C, the next element of the B will point to the A. And then we'll say that the a.prev should point to the B. And then lastly, what we can do is that we'll say cur is equal to next. And so this is the idea that I was talking about, where we get to this point right here, and we're saying that if we're at the B, we said that our cur.next should point to the A, and so we store the C node in our next variable at the very beginning of the iteration of the while loop. And so now, instead of saying cur is equal to cur.next, because if we do that, the B will go to the A, we're saying our cur should be equal to next, so our B will go to the C. And the last thing we also need to do is we want to say that our prev will be equal to cur. And so all this is doing is this is going to, if we start at the A and we say that, if we start at the A, we're going to say our prev is equal to A, and then our cur is going to be equal to the B. And so then our B will be the cur. And then when we get here, our prev will be equal to the B, and when we iterate over, our cur will be the C. And this is because, remember, we stored it in the next variable. And so as we loop through, we're saying that our prev is equal to the previous node that we just handled for. And so once we get to the very end, what we want to say is that we want to redefine where our self.head is, so that it's going to start at the D and not the A. And so we'll say self.head is equal to prev. And so that should be the end of our reverse function. Why am I getting an error here? Okay, so I don't think we really have to worry about that. First, what I'll do is I will print out, clear. I will run this code and make sure that we append it perfectly fine. And so we do, we have A, B, C, D. And now what we, hopefully, if we call this reverse function, ooh, we are getting an infinite loop. That means we're getting caught somewhere. If cur is equal to cur.next, or cur is equal to next is equal to cur.next, our cur is equal to cur.next, cur.prev equal to sorry about this. I mixed this up, so it should be cur.prev is equal to cur.next. Right. So if we run that, yeah, so we get DCBA. And so let's just kind of go through what happened. So we appended our ABCD, right? And so now we go through our first node. At this point, cur is equal, prev is equal to none. Our cur is equal to the A. And so we loop through, we check to make sure there's a cur at this position. And so since there is, we store our next variable. So we're on the A and we're saying that the next is going to be equal to the B. And then what we're saying is that our cur.next, so our next element, the next element of our A node should point to the none. And then the prev element of our cur node should point to the previous next element. And so what that means is right now, we're on the A node right now, the cur.next is the B and the cur.prev is the none. And so what we're saying is that our cur.next will be pointing to the none, right? So that instead of pointing to the B, it'll be pointing to the none. And then our cur.prev, which is, remember, is pointing backwards, it will point to the B, because in this case, our A will be pointing to none, and if we go backwards, it should go to the B. And so then we set our new pre-variable equal to the cur, which is the A that we were just working with, and then we're saying our cur is equal to the next. And remember, we did this because if we say cur is equal to cur.next, in fact, I can show you, it'll just generate an infinite oh, sorry. And so if there's a cur.prev, we're saying that our cur.prev should be equal to our cur.next. And then we move our prev over, we move our next over, and we get to the very end of the list. And when we get to the very end of the list, we're just printing it out. and we're redefining where our self.head is, so that our self.head is pointing to our prev, which is the very last node, right? Because if we loop through this whole list and we get to the D, after we work with the D, the next thing will be none, and so then our prev will be equal to the D node, and so we just say our self.head will be equal to the prev, and that's how we get our DCBA. And so I'll just add a couple more, just to make sure. I'll even add some numbers, see how that works. So right now we have A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2. And so if we print out the reverse, we should get 2, 1, E, D, C, B, A. So if we run that, we get 2, 1, E, D, C, B, A. And so let me run the cur is equal to the cur.next, because I want to see what happens with that. If I say cur is equal to cur.next, yeah, so we only print out the A, and so what happens in that case is we reset what, so if we go up here, we say our cur node is the self.head, which is the A, and then we loop through, we say our next is equal to the B, we say our cur.next will be the cur.prev, and so now the A is pointing towards the none, the cur.next for the A node is pointing to the none, and then we change what the cur.prev is pointing to. But then when we get over here, remember up here we said our cur.next will point to the none, and so if we say our cur is equal to the cur.next, that means our cur is now none, and so we loop through, and when we get to this point, even through our based on our first iteration, cur is now none, so we just end the while loop right there, and our prev is equal to the A, and so our self.head will be equal to the prev, which again is the A, and so that's why we only print out the A, because we have A, and then the next node after the A is none, because we never ran that cur is equal to the next node. We never said that we should go from the A to the B. We said we will go from the A to the none. And so hopefully that kind of made sense. Basically what we're just doing is we're saving what our next node should be, and then we're just rerouting what the arrows look like for this current node. And while we're rerouting, that messes up, that kind of changes what our cur.next and cur.prev is. And so before we do anything with that node, we just store what the original next value is, so that we can just go to that next node right after. And so, and again, we're storing our prev variable every time we need it, so that we can use it in the future. And when we get to the very end, we can just set our self.head is equal to the prev. And so that is reversing a doubly linked list. Hopefully that helps you guys, and see you guys in the next video. All right, later.